So you can see that this EQ gives us a graphical view of our changes to the frequency spectrum. And so, that's why they call it a graphic EQ. So now every EQ we'll look at basically tweaks the spectrum in some sort of similar way. And depending on what we're putting through that EQ, I mean, we could be doing things like rolling off the low end of a hi-hat track, or maybe boosting the high end on a vocal track, maybe even notching out just a thin slice of our mix on stage in a live situation to reduce feedback. Lots of very cool things to do. Okay, so you're probably thinking that there's got to be a better way to define the range of frequencies on, say, a kick drum to help its attack. It's actually from about 2 to 6K, but a great way to refer it is just something like smack, that smack. As we go along, we're going to refer to certain frequency ranges with a shortcut name that we can use, that it's much more kind of a descriptive word than just those cold numbers. Like the body of an acoustic guitar, or the clank of a hi-hat, or the air of vocals. Once you start to kind of know these neighborhoods of frequencies, you can start to have kind of a shorthand method to talk to other engineers or musicians who are trying to understand what you are trying to achieve. You might end up saying something to another engineer, I think the bass needs a little bit more bite, or the snare is a little bit too tubby. And the way that we're going to understand why we need to develop these kinds of descriptive words is that you can't just have a favorite set of frequencies that you boost all the time for all of the instruments. I've been asked more than a few times to name my favorite frequencies, and I always have a hard time kind of explaining it, because I really can't have those hard and fast rules on EQ until I created this analogy of fat thighs and baldness. What? Let's take this generic stick figure of a person. Not knowing who this person is, would you think it'd be a good idea to have the upper arms enlarged, just pumped super big old guns? This might look good on a guy, but maybe not so much on a woman. A lot of gals try to have thinner arms. The opposite might be said of the other region, as evidenced by the success of cosmetic surgeon and the cosmetic surgeon industry, if you know what I mean, and you probably know what I mean. Okay, what I'm trying to get across here is that you can't just generally say that thin arms are great or a big butt is not desirable. It really depends on the individual, and generally we know as an individual how to accentuate the areas that we think are desirable and hide the areas that we're not so proud of. So if you have a big belly, you soon learn not to wear horizontal stripes. Okay, so, well, in the same way, every sound source has great segments of the frequency spectrum that we want to highlight, and maybe a few that we may want to hide. For example, say in a kick drum, there's a boxiness quality around the 200 hertz mark that we might want to just pull back a little bit. But there's a really cool sweet spot around 2K that if we boost, creates a real smack of that attack that can really cut through a mix rather than boosting the fundamental of that kick drum down at, say, 60 hertz or so. It takes a lot of air to move those very low frequencies. So if you want to boost the perceived loudness of a kick drum, a 2K boost can really, really help. So do you get that stupid analogy that each and every person might want to increase their attributes or hide their flaws, depending on the individual? Same thing with audio. Look at each sound individually and highlight the good stuff and scoop out the stuff that's kind of not so great. We'll look at specific examples in the EQ in action section later on. Now, before we look at all of the tools available, there are also very natural ways that we can EQ things without using any electronics at all. I mean, just think about when you make sounds with your mouth, when you go, ah, wow, wow, wow. When you close your mouth down, you are filtering out the higher frequencies, right? Go, ah, it gets duller as you close your mouth there. That's something you can naturally do with your voice. Another thing to do is mic position. With a cardioid microphone, there's a thing called the proximity effect. And when you get a cardioid microphone, and bring it closer to you, the low end starts to ramp up a lot. It's called the proximity. You know, the closer the proximity to the sound source, then the low end will get much more pronounced. We haven't tweaked an EQ knob anywhere, right? But the simple movement of a microphone towards the guitar, towards the sound source will have that natural EQing thing. Same thing with where you place microphones near a guitar. Typically on an acoustic guitar, I'll place it around the 12th fret, about maybe a foot away from the guitar. But if you place it more towards a sound hole, you'll get a more of a boomier sound, more towards the bridge, and you'll get a more trebly sound. So there's lots of different ways that you can EQ in terms of the mic position. And the best way to do that is throw some headphones on so you're listening to that microphone, and then just start moving that microphone around and get the sound that you're after. If you can EQ that way without tweaking anything on your mixer or in plugins or anything like that, it's a better way to do that right at the sound source than, you know, using a million different EQ tools. But having that being said, let's look at the tools that we can use in EQ.